You've certainly seen these kinds of images of a poor guy wearing $50K worth of clothes next to this billionaire wearing basic $20 t-shirts, or those who explain that the end goal isn't to look rich, but to be rich. And when you're rich, well, you don't need to pretend by wearing Gucci. So on top of these images being totally absurd, you see a poor man wearing a $30,000 chain. Frankly, we all want his poverty. But this is something that comes up pretty often when talking about bread and riches. We get told that the rich never spend their bread on clothes, that luxury brands are only there to scam the poor, and we have this superhuman or even robotic view of the rich that says they always act with pure rationality, like it was some algorithm making decisions in their place. On one side, we have the poor, a little behind, who let themselves be dazzled by luxury brands and the streetwear hype, and on the other, the rich, who constantly makes the right choices with their money and know damn well they don't need to buy thousands worth of clothes to prove that they're rich. And that's kind of true. When you take a peek at Mark Zuckerberg or Bill Gates, you quickly realize that clothing-wise, they're far from the typical flexer cliche that has tons of cash, even though they're not quite in need of money. So does Zuckerberg actually dress up with $20 shirts? Are most of the luxury consumers poor? Or would the luxury logos just be associated with the different social classes? These are the questions we'll try to answer today, but we're especially gonna try to break that myth that's been there for too long.
It's Brittany, bitch. And I am back.
New vid, we're gonna talk about a subject that's making us all go crazy. This famous cliche that Instagram entrepreneurs have been repeating for years.
Oh shit, here we go again.
We actually asked you guys for your thoughts on Insta. It was a pretty tight contest between those who completely agree on that vision and those who thought it was a bunch of crap. But the majority of you were decently on par with these kind of images. And in reality, you're right on one point, even though those pictures are obviously exaggerated, and that the notion of poverty here refers to the writings on Robert Kiyosaki. When we say poor, we're not really talking about the guy struggling under the poverty line, but we know that today an enormous portion of luxury brand customers are what we call Henrys, an acronym for high earner, not rich yet. We also know that many luxury customers are young, sometimes with pretty modest earnings, but still, they buy those products on rare occasions to treat themselves or their relatives. That's why we saw the emergence of merch fashion, which is a more accessible luxury created to sell somewhat entry-level luxury, but also the luxurious e-commerce sites that almost all offer payment plans for their products. We don't have precise data on the average salary of luxury consumers, but these elements show that a lot of people buy luxury goods without having the means to do so, and obviously when they pull out racks for these products, they feel the need to show them off in order to make the purchases worth it in some way. That's why we see a pretty interesting curve in the fashion world in general. When you see that it's pretty cheap, it usually means you'll see no logos or a logo with very little value. On the other hand, when we get to the big boy prices, you'll find that the luxury logos with a ton of value attached to them. But surprisingly, when you go even higher in the price charts, you'll see that the logos tend to disappear, considering that those products are made for a totally different profile, where big flashy logos are seen as a bit vulgar or outdated today. It's leftover from old customs where the English aristocracy used to say that wearing someone else's coat of arms was a thing worthy of servants. They still think that wearing other people's logos is for losers, which is why, for example, at royal family events, you'll never see a guy show up in a Gucci t-shirt or Philip Klein sweatshirt. And yet, whether it's the royal family or guest, none of them will ever be dressed for less than 20,000 bucks.
Oh my God! Wow!
Thinking that rich people don't fall for the trap of overly expensive clothes is pretty naive. On the contrary, they pay a lot more for exceptional clothing in terms of quality, of course, but with a quality-price ratio, that's still equally as bad. We have two ways of consuming luxury: the quote-unquote poor version, which is more flashy and immediately understood, like reality TV stars, influencers, or training sellers who absolutely want to show they have money. This is a mass-market luxury, which is often a victim of its success and is very counterfeit and distributed in large quantities, which makes it lose its exclusivity and value. And on the other side, there's the ultra luxury that's subtler, with less flashy signals that only connoisseurs will recognize, and is mainly for the ultra rich, even those who are not particularly interested in clothing, with brands like Zegna, Tom Ford, Ralph Lauren, Purple Label, or Loro Piana that also offers basic versatile designs at prices that are a little less versatile, and we still end up with coats worthy of H&M's 2015 collection for 40 G's. The ultra rich also flexes, but between themselves and with their codes. And if you're not in that world, it can be hard to understand because they're not trying to impress us, the commoners. And in fact, many ultra rich people play this false modesty to gain sympathy capital. This is the case for Mark Zuckerberg, who is often used in this kind of a meme and is presented too often as the example of the humble rich guy focused on his projects and success and doesn't wear Gucci. But don't believe the hype. He definitely does not shop at Uniqlo and goes grocery shopping at Walmart. For example, those basic t-shirts that he could easily buy at any clothing brand for a couple of 20s are actually custom made at Brunello Cucinelli that goes close to $300 each. He may not have a Gucci logo on his chest, but he bought a whole island and all the houses in his neighborhood just so he wouldn't have any neighbors.
That's suspicious. That's weird.
A real example of a typical billionaire rat who doesn't spend anything on clothes would be Warren Buffett, a really popular and rich investor in the field who, after wearing the highest quality Italian brands for all his life, decided about a decade ago to stop rocking bespoke suits from luxury brands that cost 20 grand and instead wear made in China type suits from a brand called Trans, after meeting and discussing with the entrepreneur behind the brand, who to him are offering quality suits and affordable ones at that. But in both cases, it's mostly people who couldn't care less about clothes, whether it's Zuckerberg or Buffett. It ain't very relevant to check out how they dress. These are guys who spent their entire life working on planetary-sized projects, and typically, Mark Zuckerberg doesn't even want to use up a few seconds of his thoughts to choose his outfit for the day, and that's why he dresses the same way every day. If we want to check out the opposite, people that are full of cash but that actually care about their clothes, we can talk about the actor Jeff Goldblum, who has a real vision for fashion and a pretty over-the-top style. He almost only dresses up in luxury fashion brands that everyone knows, whether it be Celine, Saint Laurent, or Calvin Klein. And even though these are not brands anchored in the logo mania, he also happens to wear Prada shirts with big, obnoxious logos. And it's not even to prove anything, it's only that these are the nice pieces that he appreciates and that he can afford without any issues. It's also the case for rappers like Slim Jimmy, who's also crazy rich and has a vision for fashion. That's a little less complex, but you can still see that he's decently interested in it. He likes to flex with his Gucci and all over the top outfits. But even beyond flexing, when you have the chance to live like a rapper, you find yourself hanging out at places and with people that tend to make you consume luxury stuff, whether it's nice dinners, hotels, or t-shirts, with or without big luxurious logos on them. It's really because a lot of rich or even really rich people have an ego and feel the need to flex, even when being multimillionaires, that brands like Philipp Plein were introduced because, after all, even when the profiles of luxury consumers have had a tendency to vary over the years, the biggest buyers are and will always be extremely rich people. So this myth is absolutely unfounded. These pics from Instagram entrepreneurs are an absolute shit show from either way you look at it. Well, there is a bit of truth behind it, hinting at dudes with a full Gucci fit and nothing in the refrigerator, but they mistakenly try to put that in opposition to the humble billionaires who just spend their money correctly, which isn't always true. So no, the Silicon Valley billionaires don't buy $20 clothing, even though their looks can tell you otherwise. No, it's not about the mindset and vision to spend more rationally. The end goal of these stupid images is to tell you that since you're not already a millionaire with a mansion in Beverly Hills, you should have spent your $1,200 on Tesla stock in 2017 instead of buying your off-white jacket that you stopped wearing 3 years ago, which isn't entirely false looking back at it, but that's a whole other debate. We're gonna stay on this one. Now that we've pretty much told you everything, it's your turn to tell us what you think about this in the comments.
Cash lacking to beat that boy. Everything fake in the world just like Toy Story. Got a boy goosebump, this shit a scare story.